Hello everyone, this is K Ranma, and I hope everyone's having a great day. Today, I'd like to talk about a movie from the silent film era called A Fool There Was, made in 1915. This movie stars Theda Bara and Edward Jose and is based on a play based on a poem by Rudyard Kipling. And I would like to talk about this particular film because I think it's interesting to analyze it on the basis of identity, autonomy, and character growth, because this film subverts expectations at almost every turn, up to and including just who was truly free within society at the time, because there were many different ideas about who was in control, who had freedom at the time, and this film had some interesting viewpoints to share. And taking into account the social concerns of the time period and the goals of the film itself when it was created, it's really shocking just how much it was able to subvert and get away with, and even manage to give a voice to a burgeoning group instead of just nipping it in the bud, as I'm pretty sure they wanted to do, but they didn't. They gave a breath of fresh air to a new movement. And this movement, which began as the Vamp, would eventually become the famous Flapper, the Flapper Girls. Pretty much a big part of its start was with this film. And the Flapper response, the Flapper movement was a direct response by many women, especially in New York, to a loss of faith in the social system after World War I. A key characteristic was the desire for social freedom. The freedom to make their own choices with regard to their interests, up to and including romantic entanglements. This all started with the Vamps, short for vampires, which at the time described women who supposedly sucked the life out of men. In the film, the Vamp, played by Theda Bara, is not a main character. She's not the main character, and she doesn't even have a name. She is a larger than life character, but she doesn't have, she's not the proper character. The proper character would be John Schuler, played by Edward Jose. And he is a banker, very boring, very boring. And so while the movie follows John's character arc, the Vamp is shown to have more control over her own autonomy than he has over his, and is a much more interesting character, which is why this caused Theda Bara's career to take off after this. But this played into a growing social fear of women in New York who were beginning to assert their independence and making their own choices about their romantic lives. And so at the beginning of the film, the audience is shown both the Vamp and John before they encounter one another. And importantly, both are portrayed as happy and carefree. John with his family and status, and the Vamp with her paramour and just lackadaisical lifestyle. Very free. This is important because this scene is informing the audience of the spheres that they each inhabit and where they are most in control. The vamp is shown at the tail end of a relationship, and the juxtaposition of the two different emotional states serves as a hint for the future plot of the movie. The paramour is distraught and resorting to suicide rather than living without the vamp. And the vamp is treating the whole thing as a lark. This is because to her, it always was. From the way she reacts throughout the film, she never once gives an indication of looking towards building a lasting future with either of her love interests. Instead, it is they who throw everything into the wind for her. While the audience is meant to feel sorry for the love-stricken fool choosing to resort to suicide, her response indicates that she never saw him as more than a plaything. For this, I think it's very important to read the original work by Rudyard Kipling called The Vampire, because in it emphasizes just how little the woman is invested in the relationship. It makes many points to emphasize that the man is putting his all into this and pretty much putting all of his hopes onto a woman that never, ever reciprocated, did not lead him on, did not give false hope, instead always portrayed herself as just having fun. It's a very important distinction that I really liked the original poem for stressing. And so in this film, that's a very important thing to remember, is that the vamp is not all in and never claimed to be all in. So while this is used to make her more villainous, it must also be noted that in the previous scenes, she never treated him as more than an amusement. His assumption about the nature of their relationship was never supported by her actions or behavior. As for the relationship between John and the vamp, it begins after meeting on a trip to Italy. A business trip for John, and for the vamp, a chance to meet John, who she had read about previously. Another key trait of the vamp and the flapper is that even though they were seen to live without a care in the world, they were never seen as unaware or ignorant of the world. In fact, they often were portrayed as world-weary and sick of the rules of society. This lifestyle, as shown in this film, is the foundation on which everything else is built for the couple. While in Italy, they spend their days in a bubble or cocoon far away from the worries of life. This is important as this is the moment that John's descent begins. On screen, though he tries, John can never match the vamp's boneless repose. Instead of sensuousness, he just offers limp and sedated looks. This is to show that he isn't in his natural habitat, but is lost in hers. While with her, he forgets all of his duties, which for someone else would be a marvelous thing and could even be a reprieve in small doses. However, for John, his duty is what granted him his wealth, status, and most importantly, happiness. His dereliction of duty ultimately cost him his job and forces him to return to New York. Unfortunately for John, his taste of the vamp's world was too strong to let go of. Instead of being forgotten as a romp whilst on vacation, he brings her with him into polite society. Conversely, These are the only times we see the vamp uncomfortable and not accepted. She, much like with John, doesn't quite fit into his natural habitat. She chafes at the lack of true freedom present in polite society. During this time, John sequesters himself from his friends and family and simply dotes on the vamp. In the film, he begins to appear sickly and unkempt. His previous happiness is long gone. Even though his passion for the vamp is still shown to be as strong as ever, it doesn't appear to bring him any joy or do him any good. The audience begins to see him as a lost cause who has been abandoned by his closest friends. Even the vamp, seeing him brought so low, begins to frequent other establishments, leaving him isolated and alone. This is not the end of his fall, though. His long-suffering wife is also called to action and is used as a foil to the vamp. The wife's female friend urges her to seek a divorce and find happiness elsewhere, while her male friend asks her to remain by his side. This angel and devil motif is part of a bigger question regarding the role of a wife and mother in these changing times. Also of note is the role that gender plays in the advice that she's given, with her male friend suggesting staying the course, stand by your man, and the female friend saying no, personal happiness, personal freedom, make the choice best for you. And so for a 1915 film, this was very, very out of the box. Like, just the idea of this choice. And so while listening, she opts to visit her husband one last time with their daughter in order to persuade him to return to his family. A compromise between the two. Still not rushing out, but giving him one last chance. And this meeting marks the only time that both the wife and vamp are in the same room together, although there is still no interaction between the two. They are still in separate camps, completely isolated from each other. And even though John is overjoyed to see his daughter, he still can't resist the vamp's siren call. And so he abandons his old life of happiness to a life of desperation and misery. And while the blame is placed on the vamp, it could more accurately be placed on the lifestyle she represents. Much of John's actions and behaviors are that of a man seeking to recreate the bliss he felt in Italy and believing it came from the vamp. It's suggested that before the vamp, John and his wife had never truly been hedonistic, and that's what he was after. This is why the vamp never brought him any joy while they were in New York. He didn't really love her or even understand her. He loved her lifestyle and freedom. However, the film shows that this freedom wasn't for him. An early 20th century indictment of a man trying to shirk his responsibility. Even though it was frowned upon during her time, a woman being frivolous was still acceptable and explainable. But a man following suit, that was unheard of, and it was thought that he must be both weak-willed and under the influence of a woman. Both terrible things for a man in the early 20th century. In this film, while castigating the man as a fool for stepping outside of his accepted role, the women are raised up as autonomous and capable of making decisions for themselves and bettering their situations for it. At the end, the wife gets her divorce and is shown as wise to do so. That was the right decision. And the vamp suffers no consequences even as John dies broken and alone. The vamp also made the right decision to go back to her previous life. Only John was shown to have erred because only John isn't allowed true freedom. And so this film ends as a final statement on the true cost of freedom and who pays for it. And as a movie made to try and fearmonger about the rise of the vamp, the rise of the flapper, it really did not do a good job of making that movement seem like a bad move. It made it seem like the only real way forward to escape the shackles of a broken society. So this movie, while very ahead of its time, was kind of ahead of its time in spite of itself. Not intentionally did it mean to kickstart this whole movement, which is what it ended up doing, making vamps super popular and well known. Like Theda Bara became a very successful vamp star in the later years. And so it's a very interesting movie to watch. I would recommend it. It's free. It's on YouTube. So I'll give it a shot. And, it's silent, but it's got a really good musical score, I believe. And I just think it's a great watch. Lots of interesting think pieces. Lots of interesting ideas involved. So just watch. So that's all for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope you enjoy A Fool There Was. Goodbye, and have a great rest of your day. See you.